Greetings, Psychonauts! Welcome back to Disenthrall. I am Patrick Smith. Today we're going to have a very interesting event episode. We are at the Consciousness and Psychedelics conference happening here in Arlington, Texas. This is something that is totally out of my sphere of knowledge, generally. Intoxicants and drugs, or as the people here might call it, medicines. So my purpose here today is to interview some people, check out the event, ask a lot of questions, and see what there is to learn. I'm pretty skeptical of a lot of this stuff when it crosses from being recreational. Like, I have no problem with recreational or claims of it being recreational. I get pretty skeptical when we start getting into claims of like actual medical benefits and stuff like that. So if we encounter that, we might have some good conversation here today. Let's see how it goes.
Control 100% out, and that's what other people need to get out. Out is the answer. Out is the solution. Like what's it all about now? Bet you all it out how your minds are owned by the few and to whom you all bow down blindly or willfully, serving a system built to be a prison, skillfully structured, destructive and filthy. See this virus.
Hi, I'm Patrick. What's your name?
Zenobia.
Zenobia. That's the coolest name I've seen at the conference so far. So I walked into the vendor room over there, and they have a vendor table talking about creating a church. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about this church?
So we recently actually just got our federal tax exemptions as a nonprofit church. We've already got it through the state.
So you are a church?
We are a church.
The epicness just went up a notch there.
100% bona fide nonprofit church. Our sacrament is ayahuasca. And now that we actually have the tax exemptions, our next goal is to petition the FDA to have the restrictions lifted so that we can practice our sacrament legally without fear of consequences.
Okay, so what are is sacrament like a legal term? You had to like register your sacraments, or what is that about?
I don't know if it's necessarily a legal term. I think it's the best descriptive word that we could use to describe what we're doing. It's not for recreation. It's done in a very controlled, safe environment. And I think the word sacrament just kind of puts that emphasis on the fact that it's not for fun, you know?
So the point that I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, the point is to navigate the legalities that block you from access to ayahuasca by using this sort of church loophole? Would you call it a loophole?
I wouldn't. I actually really like that we're a church because it's not about the ayahuasca. It's really not. That's part of our journey. It's part of how we facilitate our own conscious expansion. But what it really comes down to is community. We are a community that gathers weekly. When you do something like ayahuasca, it's such a profound, life-changing experience that having a community around you that you can talk to and have support. I think one of the big challenges for people who go to the jungle and drink ayahuasca, they come back home and they can feel quite alienated. And so for us, it's not about the ayahuasca per se, it's about the community that we're building.
So let's talk about ayahuasca, because I'm a total straight edge, or what do you call it? Straight. I don't do many intoxicants.
Okay.
So I'm kind of here to learn and to be a skeptic and to learn, really.
I love skeptics because you should be able to answer questions correctly and honestly. And when it comes to ayahuasca, it's not for the faint of heart.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you were teaching. I don't want to interrupt the teacher.
It's not for the faint of heart. It's very actually intense. It can be overwhelming. Sometimes people freak out. Sometimes people bliss out. Sometimes people shit themselves. Yeah, it's an endeavor.
Okay. So ayahuasca ceremonies are one of the most popular events at Anarchapulco. I don't know if you've heard of that event. So it's coming up here in February. I'll be there speaking on the main stage. So why?
Why?
Why is ayahuasca the sacrament? Why is it the thing?
Well,
why is it important to you?
It's important. Ayahuasca is important to me because as an experience in and of itself, I've seen all of space and time. I've relived past experiences. The clarity that comes after an ayahuasca experience, it's like all the bullshit that bogs you down is suddenly lifted up. And for a moment or a day, you have perfect clarity. You know exactly what you need to do to be healthy. You know exactly what to do to be happy. You suddenly, things make sense. You understand why you should forgive. All of it is crystal clear. And so that's just the beginning. What you do after ayahuasca is where it becomes really important. That's why integration is important. That's why community is important. Because you don't just drink this cup and your life is fixed. You drink this cup and you know how to fix your life. So it really comes down to the steps you're going to take afterwards.
So one of the first things you said was you saw all of the universe, time and space.
I saw the infinity of time and space.
What does that even mean?
It means, well...
to a rational mind, I'm sitting here, it just sounds obviously
okay.
That's impossible.
I can try to explain it to you,
okay.
what I experienced.
Yeah.
I drank my cup, I laid on my mat, I began to see the earth and the people on it. The joke I made when I came out of it.
So you're hallucinating.
I'm seeing it in my mind's eye.
Okay.
Because when you drink ayahuasca, there's visual hallucinations. You're seeing patterns and colors, but there's also behind the eye hallucinations that are crystal clear. It's like watching a movie. And so what I saw was the earth and people coming up on the earth, building things, them tumbling down. I saw that infinity shape, and in that moment, the only thing I could think to say is that we're just potatoes moving rocks. And so we're just potatoes.
Can I interrupt you so I can get this?
Are we in the way?
No. But I'm documenting them, so this is a great thing to document.
Where were we?
Time and space.
Yeah. So obviously you're saying that you're seeing something that you literally cannot see.
In that moment, our existence made sense. That it comes and goes in waves. Like the human race is here now. We may not always be here. One day it's just going to be a rock again.
Yep.
And then maybe something else will come. I just saw the evolution of existence as far from my perspective. But the joke I like to make is I'm really not that creative. So I know I'm not just like talking to myself, because I've had experiences on ayahuasca that I don't know that I could have pulled out of a hat. It's something that I wouldn't normally think in that way.
So I guess every time I've asked somebody, and I haven't asked a lot of people, so I'm not like an expert on interviewing ayahuasca users, but every time the language they use to describe their experience is never from the first person perspective.
What do you mean?
Like we live our lives from first person.
Right.
We take in sense data through, the 12 senses or whatever, and we assimilate those and we build a picture of the world around us and we interact with that world through those senses from this perspective, from like my eyes looking at you right now. This is my experience of the world. When people describe their experiences, they never talk about an experience from their self, right? Do you agree?
I do agree with that.
Think about that?
What I think about that is when you drink ayahuasca, something clicks, something that you don't have to tell people this. You're communing with a spirit. It feels like another person is with you. They call her Pachamama, they call her Mama Ayahuasca, but it really does feel like a communion with somebody else. Somebody's facilitating and showing you things that, like I said, I wouldn't normally have come to those conclusions. It was really like a revelation.
So you said you take the ayahuasca and then when you're done, you know what you need to do to fix your life.
Oh, at least you have clarity.
Where does that come from?
The clarity?
Yeah.
Well, there's some interesting theories on that. One of them that I like is that as a human being, to be able to see things like that all the time would be overwhelming. So when you take ayahuasca, it's not actually opening your mind, it's closing the lens. So that all of this extra stimuli that might always be there, but we are shut off to it so that because it would be overwhelming to always be in that space. So you go in, you get your clarity. Sometimes people let go of trauma. People who've been abused, raped, gone to war. On your mat is a safe place to let it all go and find that forgiveness for yourself and for others, to heal from addiction. I mean, the possibilities are endless. The intention that you take into ceremony is so important because it's not just a passive thing that's going to happen to you. And every time you drink ayahuasca, it's completely different. So I don't know where I was going with that.
I'm also looking for like a null hypothesis. So have you had people that have taken it and not really had these experiences? Do you have people that are like, yeah, that was nothing. That was not like I don't have clarity. I don't know how to change my life now. You know what I mean? Like
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's not a one cup wonder, you know. When I first learned about ayahuasca, I was confused why people kept going back. I'm like, how many cups do you need to drink? Like I didn't understand that it's like an onion. You're pulling back layers. And sometimes people come and drink ayahuasca and I'm drinking the same cup and they have no experience whatsoever. You know, just like every trip's different, every body is different, and they experience the medicine in a completely unique way. I work with people who said they've never seen a visual on ayahuasca, which confuses me because for me it's highly visual, you know, and so when they say they don't have any hallucinations, I think that's interesting. For them it's all internal or it's all physical.
Why do you call it medicine?
You know, that's interesting. I don't know if I've been conditioned to call it medicine or if I truly believe that, but I think...
Let me elaborate on my question. So, I find that a lot of people call a lot of things medicine.
Yeah.
Like a heroin addict would call it their medicine,
Yeah, I need
right?
my medicine.
So, like, should medicine have like a stronger, more objective, like higher, meaningful definition, or is it literally just anything that makes you feel good?
Well, I mean, poison and medicine can be, you know, like, depends on how you use it. So if you're using it with the intention of it being medicine, then it is. If you're using it with the intention of recreation, then that's what it is then too.
Well, coffee's my medicine then.
I love it.
All right.
Did you ever drink ayahuasca?
Would I ever? I don't know. You reminded me of my question. That's it. Would I ever? So the first thing that I think when somebody asks me, hey, do you want to come to this ayahuasca ceremony, is because you only experience it from your perspective, no one can really, without I guess doing some kind of mass study, can really say that it didn't damage their brain in a way that makes them think it helped them.
I agree. It's
Isn't that scary?
Dangerous, it's confusing and scary.
My brain is all I've got.
When
so
I
if I mess this thing up,
right,
that's it.
When I first started, like with DMT, when someone first proposed that I smoke it, I was like, I don't know about all that because of the brain chemistry, and I understand how neurons and neurotransmitters work, and it's a lock and key, and I don't want to damage my neurotransmitter. So those are things that I have taken into consideration, and I'm not a doctor, but I've drank a lot of ayahuasca, and I've known a lot of people who've drank way more ayahuasca than me, and I feel like and like you said, I won't know. Maybe when I'm 50, I'll be like, fuck, shouldn't have done that.
Well, I mean, you can't know. Like,
you can't.
If it did change you in some way, you might not know.
You might not know.
Change, right?
But, you know, I say the same thing about people who started vaping. When vaping first started, I was like, man, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
We know what smoking does, but we don't actually know what vaporizing is doing to our lungs.
Right.
We can propose, but...
Right.
So you always have to approach things with caution. And one of the things that I really encourage people to do in all settings is to build their intuition. You know, like if it sounds right for you or if it feels right for you, then you should 100% pursue it. And I have lots of friends who are like, Zen, you're crazy. I'm not coming to one of your crazy ayahuasca ceremonies. And I'm like, cool. No one's going to make you. You know, it's a choice, free will, all the way.
I appreciate that. Let's bring it full circle and back to the church thing.
Yeah.
So you're creating a legal organization that might allow you to have these experiences in a location in the world in which you would otherwise be thrown in a cage or worse,
right,
for doing that.
We want to create a safe environment for people to explore their own mind. We have a very hands-off approach when it comes to ayahuasca ceremonies. You know, we leave you to it unless it becomes like a problem, like you're rolling around and touching other people. We don't intervene. You know, we want you to face yourself and have your personal experience, and we like to just hold that space for you. When I think that's the best a facilitator of ayahuasca could ever do, is just create a safe place for you to explore your own mind.
Are you based where? In Texas? Dallas?
We are based in Texas. We are in Anna.
Okay, where's that?
It's like North 75 near McKinney, Plano, just north of that.
Okay, so step one was to get approved for the nonprofit.
Yeah.
Is it 501c3 or is it something else for churches?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Doesn't matter. Just curious.
I'm not that guy.
There's other voluntarists that are interested in creating, forming churches for protection in other ways.
We are actually shooting a documentary right now because we think what we're doing is so important. that it's not just for us. We don't want to corner the ayahuasca church market. If anything, we want to show other people how to do it in a legal, crossing all of our T's and dotting all of our I's, and make sure that it is safe. We don't want to supply people with medicine that could get them locked in a cage, as you said. Like, that's horrible, and that's not ever going to be our intention. We want it to be a safe, controlled environment.
So are you a priest, a bishop? How does the hierarchy work in the church?
So I drank ayahuasca with Jay for the first time. I think it was 6 years ago. And I'm a massage therapist. I'm a life coach. I taught massage. I taught anatomy and pathology. So like, I have my expertise in the healing realm. And I just asked him, I said, hey, if you ever need help in a ceremony, let me know. And he's like, actually, I do. So I've been facilitating with him for almost 3 years.
So then the next step is to take ayahuasca, which you've identified as your sacrament for the church. And then what? How do you said the next step was to get it to where you wouldn't be prosecuted for it.
Correct.
How do you do that?
We have a lawyer. We hired a lawyer to help us with all of this. So when we became a church and when we got the tax exemptions, that was all done. Like, that's why I didn't know the answer to your question, because we pay people to do that. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I don't know what the next step is from there or how exactly it's done, but we're really excited about the potential. The climate right now, everyone is telling us you're never going to get it done in Texas. And that's a real possibility.
This is Texas.
Yeah. This is Texas. But it's also 2020. And the climate is evolving and changing so dramatically that my intention for it is that I have a daughter who's 11, that one day she'll be able to, I'm gonna cry, look back and say, like they did something.
It's amazing how much activism is motivated by our children, isn't it?
Yeah, leave it a better place for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you for talking. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
How big's your group in Texas?
It's hard to say. We probably have a few hundred people in our church that are members. And it's kind of like a live creature, because we don't just drink ayahuasca. Like I said, we have weekly Sunday gatherings. And so it's just a nice ebb and flow. People come, people don't. Some of our events, we can have as many as 50 people.
Are they all in person, or can people participate via live stream or something?
That's a good question. I think we're moving in that direction. But it's meant to be a personal touch. Mm-hmm. The cacao ceremonies and the integration meetings, they just feel like group therapy. Okay. We all sit down, we grab our hot cup of cacao, and we pick a theme, and we go around the room, and people get their chance to share their feelings, what they're thinking, how they've been doing since ceremony. Because, like I said, it can be a really jarring experience. And you go home, and your mom's like, "That's weird. You're weird. What are you doing?" And you're like, "Fuck, now I feel even more alienated." So, our intention is to make sure that people don't feel left out to dry.
Interesting.
If you want to come and talk and cry on our couch and tell us about your dog, we will listen.
Where can people find out more about it?
TwoBirdsChurch.com.
TwoBirdsChurch.com. All right. Well, thank you very much for talking to me.
Right in our faces, I stand back in amazement. How the whole world's embracing their own enslavement. But some move to a different drum to push the shift that needs to come. Through the mind or through the gun. Either way, it must be done. All the time has come. It's hitting home for everyone. It's a global conspiracy. There ain't nowhere to run. Better be armed with the truth and a gun. For when they send their troops to get it done. It's an all around the time has come. It's hitting home for everyone. It's a global conspiracy. There ain't nowhere to run. Better be armed with the truth and a gun. For when they send their troops to get it done.
Bob Smiley, how are you, sir?
Good, how are you?
I'm very good. I haven't talked to you in like a year on the channel. We need to get you back on. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. What you been up to?
Just spreading the word about jury nullification and jury powers as far and wide as I can.
This is one of the best jury nullification activists I know, ladies and gentlemen. And if you don't know what jury nullification is, what is it?
Simply, it is you nullifying the government's bad laws, bad cops, bad prosecutions. It's just you saying no more government, not guilty.
Getting on a jury, saying not guilty.
That's it.
That's it.
In a nutshell.
And there's a little bit more to it than that, but really not much. There's some tips to how to get on a jury. It's like everybody always talks about how jury duty is a terrible, pain in the ass, horrible thing, but it's like it's a way to literally be a hero and Bob can tell you how to do it. And I think you have something fun for us to do here. But before we get into that, where can we send people to find more information?
Okay, so go to fija.org. It's for the Fully Informed Jury Association, and look up the little section that says "Called for Jury Duty." I want you to read through there, and you can read some of the brochures that they have that we also have on the table, and they will help guide you. But there's also something called Surviving Boy Dyer. It's going through what they call the jury selection process, right? It's really not jury selection, it's jury deselection, because your courts are trying to get a conviction, so they're getting rid of people who would free the defendant. So your job is to know this, not answer the questions in a way that would get you kicked off a jury, like tell them that you know that they're crooked and all cops suck. You can't do that. That's not going to get you picked for a jury duty. Even though you know cops suck, you can go ahead and say, we have a right to hear everything they've got to say. We should hear it. So let's hear all the facts. But know that you're supposed to go in there and judge them as well.
What's hilarious is that most people think it's hard to get out of jury duty, but it's actually hard to get on a jury when you want to. It's like if you go in there and just speak a little bit of truth, even a little bit of truth, right, you're out of there.
That's right. Yeah. So you don't want to bring a constitution in there. You don't want to bring. Isn't
that insane, ladies and gentlemen? Especially people that believe in the Constitution, like. You don't want to bring a constitution in there. You heard it here, folks. Do not bring a constitution into jury duty.
And you don't want to bring a magazine in something like High Times. You don't want to do that because they're going to say, "Uh-oh, this guy's in support of the drug war." You want to be able to be seated. You want to be careful of what you show your cards, what you know, what you believe, because you want to get on that jury. And you want to be able to nullify this drug war. Null, say no, end it. You're not guilty actually can literally save a life, save the spouse, and save generations, because the children still have mom or dad there.
Yeah, people always ask me, they ask me quite often, like, I want to help the world in general. How can I be how can I be an activist for good? And this is one of the most powerful, easy, immediate ways to literally go and be a hero. Like, not just like help people by donating some food or something for charity. This is a method of heroism right here. You can save people's literal lifespan from being incarcerated over victimless crimes. So if you want to just plug yourself into some activism, look these guys up. It's amazing. So you have something cool for us today, right?
Sure. I've got I've got 3 quizzes.
Quizzes, okay.
Yeah,
all right.
You can win a piece of
with a prize, okay.
With some
all right.
candy. All right, so I'll just give you a couple of the quiz questions I have.
Hit me. I've been following this for a couple years, so I hope I get these right.
Okay. True or false? Jurors are the final peaceful barrier between the defendant and the government.
True.
Very good. You might win some candy.
Sure isn't the cops or the judges or the prosecutors or pretty much anything inside the courtroom. Or the Constitution, or the Bill of Rights, or the laws.
Which I'll say this: the Bill of Rights is really that's a horrible name. Should have called it Bill of Restrictions. Restrictions on the government where they shouldn't violate your natural rights, and if they do, they should have be put in a guillotine for violating those rights.
Hear, hear.
So, anyway, all right.
Guess what we have in Dallas. Its name is Slicey Boy. Anyway, moving on.
So, a couple more questions. The plea bargain, A, is constitutional. B, is terrorism by prosecution. C, is unconstitutional. D, strips we the people of the right to judge the laws. Or E, all but answer A. It's not constitutional to have a plea bargain. It is terrorism.
Wait, I'm supposed to answer the quiz.
You're right. But I've got a narrative, Patrick. Okay? I have a narrative here, and that's what I'm pushing here. If you notice, these questions are actually, all right. I'll let you answer the next one.
No, it's coercion. And it's funny is when they offer you the deal, the thing that you have to sign for the plea deals usually has some kind of language in it that says, I am not being coerced into agreeing to this. But you absolutely are. They're threatening you with, all these, a laundry list of laws and, literal years of your life. You're trading, to like you're trading years of your life to not risk a trial, and they're
Right.
threatening you with that. It's an absolute threat. It's absolutely coercion and terrorism and that stuff. You listen.
Right. 95% of the state cases are pled out. 98% of the federal cases are pled out. The plea bargain in the federal cases, they used to try on the average. Each federal prosecutor would try about 8 cases a year. Now it's down to under 0.5%. They don't work. All they do is terrorize.
Yep.
So let's go on.
And they'll stack a bunch of charges that they even know they'll never stick, but they do it to scare you into taking a deal so they don't have to do their job and find actual justice. I'm good. These questions are making me angry.
All right. Excessive high bail is A, a $2 billion a year business. B, cruel and unusual punishment. C, unconstitutional. D, ruins the defendant's life. Or E, all the above.
E.
Bingo. Okay.
Well, the contradiction is that if you're innocent until proven guilty, then how are they able to hold you unless you pay them money? Like, how absurd is that entire thing? Anyway, what's next?
Okay. The war on drugs is A, based on racism. The war on drugs creates a police state. C, that was B. C, creates the world's largest prison industry. D, is unconstitutional. Or E, all of the above.
All of the above.
Bingo. True or false? Over 40 million Americans have been made felons because of the war on drugs and are now unable to own firearms. This is also a war on the right to bear arms. True or false?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially in the states where you can't have both a weed license and a gun license.
Right.
You know, if you have one, they don't give you the other, or they take the other one away.
Right. So when you fill out these ATF forms, they're pretty clear about you smoke pot, you don't own a gun. This is a war on our right to protect ourselves and our families.
Yep.
They want to disarm us.
Here, here.
True or false? Over 40 million
True.
Americans
Yes.
have been made. Oh, I already said that. My bad.
No.
True or false? The judge is supposed to be the referee, not a bully.
The judge's supposed to be impartial, which is impossible with the conflict of interest of him getting his paycheck from the people prosecuting you. Did I just destroy the entire justice system? Sorry about that. Oops.
You're going to get that bowl of candy. Okay, true or false? The prosecutor is the most powerful person in government because they decide your future, whether you live or die.
I would have to think about all the different powerful positions in government, but maybe.
They hold your hands, or your life in their hands. Well, so does the juror.
I was going to say, the juror,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah.
But, so the juror is the most powerful over the prosecutor. But we got to be aware about the prosecutors because some are, or most, are very, very evil.
Yep.
They're in this for the business. Okay, true or false? Jury duty is for heroes.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, one last question. Which answer is wrong? The police are A, enforcers of the government ownership of people, for the government ownership of people. B, human traffickers. The police are C, revenue generators. D, thieves through civil asset forfeiture. This is not funny. Or E, here to help you. The police are here to help you. Thieves, revenue generators, human traffickers, or enforcers.
In their mind, they're here to help you, but because of all the other things on your list being true, they're not.
They're not.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you know the 3 crimes listed in the U.S. Constitution that they can prosecute us for?
What?
Piracy on the high seas.
I hate it when that happens.
Yeah, like we've seen that. Let's see, treason and counterfeiting. That's it. That's all that's listed in the Constitution. So this freaking drug war is not part of their deal. They are so overreaching. I think it's time that we have a new government. This is less, well, I know I'm talking to Patrick. So I want this government gone.
Yeah.
But I do want people to somehow, some way protect our natural rights, period.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we get there.
Everyone wants to be protected. That's totally normal.
That's what we're supposed to have.
Yeah.
These Bill of Rights are Bill of Rights. They're supposed to be lists of restrictions, period. And they're not. Everyone thinks our rights come from these pieces of paper. They don't. They're natural, they're inherent, and but I want people to protect them. And we don't have that today. And I would like that. That's really what I want.
And just to kind of put a button on it, jury nullification is like the last sort of loophole that isn't yet closed that lets you sort of defend yourself from the government at this point.
It's you know what, it is closed in a lot of facets because they threaten us with they use the high bail, the plea bargain. That cops can lie in court. That a lot of these laws are just there are really no laws. There are no laws at all.
Yeah.
I want to. Did you get a picture of this?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, good. Because really, that's what we need to get back to. As jurors, we're supposed to bring justice in, and we're also supposed to judge the law. I don't know if I already said this. I've said it a million times today, but Article 1, Section 8 of the state constitution does say that in all cases the jurors are to judge the laws as well as the fact. And unfortunately, the judges today are telling us that we're only fact finders, that we're only to judge the facts. Our school books are telling us that we're only to judge the facts, and that's all a lie. And they're tampering with the whole system. And now we've got the world's largest prison population in Texas. We have 120 penitentiaries. 15 of them are private. Most people work for zero wages, and the state is making a fortune.
Sir, if I talk to no one else today, this was worth it.
Thank you.
So go check out FIJA. What's the website one more time?
Fully Informed Jury Association, FIJA.org.
All right, thank you.
Right now, I'm a graduate researcher at the University of North Texas, doing my thesis project on psychedelic use beyond the clinical setting. It's through my research that I got in touch with, well, for my research, I basically had to get a client, and my client was this group called ERIE, Entheogenic Research Integration Education.
So you said theogenic?
Entheogenic.
Entheogenic.
Yeah, and to define that term, it's basically just the spiritual or psychospiritual use of psychedelics or certain, hallucinogenic substances.
So, I guess have patience with me because I'm a complete.
There's a lot of new terminology that, especially if you're not in the community, it's probably,
And I find that my hackles rise when I start hearing a lot of new woo words.
Oh,
and
entheogens. Oh yeah, can I explain a little bit more about the history
just
of that?
Sure. Start at the beginning and tell me where this stuff comes from, and if it has meaning or if it just is something that people use to sound cool.
So here's the history. It does sound cool. I'll give you that. But the history behind it, the term was first coined in '79 by Ott and some other psychedelic researchers, and basically the main idea was the term psychedelic had kind of become a little outdated because during the 60s, of course, it was associated with the countercultural movement, and that kind of had a lot of backlash culturally with the rest of mainstream society, so to speak. So the term psychedelic became almost like a dirty word, and so they had to come up with basically a new term. So a group of anthropologists and researchers are like, they're actually doing research on the indigenous and historical use of psychedelics in sacred spaces. And they realize there's a certain level of sacredness, of unique, use of these substances to connect with their indigenous cosmology that was somehow distinctly different than, this, Westerner-based psychedelic use of just, it's recreational, we're doing it for whatever kind of reason. It's a completely different framework. And so that's kind of what they're meaning by that term. But I've seen the term now applied to just kind of a using psychedelics for a psycho-spiritual purpose, using it to either connect with yourself on a deeper personal or on a deeper spiritual level.
Can you explain that term maybe a little more in depth? Psycho-spiritual.
So psycho-spiritual is just kind of a, you could also break that down to personal spiritual. You could either consider it like personal development, like working on, you yourself as a person, if you're kind of more of a secular minded person, or maybe if you're more materialistic instead of being spiritualistic. But for those that are more spiritual, you'd probably just identify as like the more spiritual use of psychedelics or using psychedelics to develop yourself spiritually. It's a way of looking at it.
Okay, and so what's your research around? I think.
So underground psychedelic use. I also like to phrase it naturalistic psychedelic use. Mm-hmm. The reason why I'm studying this area is because, what we often see is, the clinical psychedelic research. It's about the clinical applications. Or we see settings of indigenous use in ceremonial contexts. But we don't, what about people like me? What about people that are doing psychedelics not in the clinic, not in indigenous healing circles? What about us? And where do we fit? Why isn't the research talking about us? Why aren't we even being mentioned? And so my whole kind of idea was to bring more perspective and to emphasize those light so that we can have a better understanding of people who use psychedelics, and understanding that people can use it in different settings and they can do so quite responsibly, even given the context that these things are illegal and highly stigmatized. And the whole prohibitive model just introduces so much more dangers when acquiring these substances.
That's true.
Because you really just don't know where you're going to get.
That's true. So let's talk about the difference between something a doctor prescribes mm-hmm. and something that you take yourself.
Yeah.
I guess the first difference probably for most people is that when you go to see a doctor, you have an issue that you're trying to get help with.
Yeah.
And so the doctor is prescribing it for you, hopefully with some kind of research backing his prescription.
For sure.
To help you with the thing that you came to him for.
Right.
When you take it for yourself, and this was something that I was wrong about initially. Certainly, I think most people are just they're trained almost to depend on doctors almost exclusively for any kind of treatment.
In the West, for sure. Or in the United States, I should say specifically.
Granted.
Yeah.
And so my first reaction was like, well, okay, these people are just taking drugs and they're just doing it to enjoy it. And all this other stuff is just fancy words made up to make it sound more serious and justify it to the people that don't want them doing it. And I'm sure there is some of that. There has to. Let's be honest. There's some of that.
I myself used to always identify as I don't want to say identify, but I used to consider my use fairly recreational. But it was not just recreational. It was also therapeutic. Mm-hmm. Yes, it was something I would do. My intention, and I think it's important to set intentions, i.e., why you're doing this, right? And that's really important when you're doing a psychedelic. It's important even when you're doing any drug to understand why are you doing this, and to make sure that you're getting what you want. For me, enjoyment is an intention, and it's okay to enjoy yourself, and that's okay to explore. But I found in doing that over years actually kind of made me feel a lot less anxious in general. And through these, the integration of experiences, I've learned so much about myself and other people that has helped me in a therapeutic way that, no amount of anything else, no amount of seeing a psychiatrist, and I have seen psychiatrists, I've seen psychologists have done that medicine, and I don't think it's as effective, in healing and really taking care of deep down work that you need to do on your inner psyche that you can get with psychedelics. And I really feel if you do properly and do it in a safe and controlled manner, that you could accomplish years of psychotherapy in potentially one session. Now, that's not going to be true for everyone. It's a tool. Tools can be used and misused, right? So that's why I'm all about really giving people the right education and really making them as most aware and informed about these things as possible so that they can make the right decisions about their own health and well-being. But, I agree with you. That's kind of not my whole aspect of my research, but one aspect has been, I kind of want to, nuance out this idea of recreational psychedelic use, because what we assume is recreational psychedelic use actually might be more therapeutic or actually might be more entheogenic. In my research study that I compiled on underground psychedelic use, the vast majority of people I talked to were doing underground therapy, basically. They were doing it because, they might have explored initially psychedelics back in the day as kids or for that recreational point, just to experiment, just to see what it was like in a different state of mind. Also psychonautic, right? So just wanting to explore different states of consciousness. That's a valid reason, right? But a lot of them, they got kids, they got careers, they just forgot about it or got too busy to deal with it or lost their connections or XYZ. Then something awful happens in their life, or they experience some trauma, or they're having a problem dealing or integrating a problem that they've always had, or a trauma or anything, and they start looking at what works for these things. They start trying to do mental health care, and all these things aren't working for them. And then they're like, well, they start doing their research, and they eventually find out about psychedelics, and then they start to use that as a form of, I don't want to say self-medication, because oftentimes people are doing it with other people. It's a very social and communal thing, but it is a form of, medicating oneself in these contexts, or it can be, right? And at least that's much of the research experience I've had, is people that you'd assume would just be doing it recreationally, we're actually doing it more therapeutically, or for that psychospiritual value.
Yeah, so the mental change that that I'm still trying to work through, is where the line is between when we still need to depend on medical professionals that have had 12 years of training versus or whatever, versus when it's safe to actually fix yourself, because there's also. Because there's certainly a case to be made for fixing yourself and doing a certain amount of work on your own.
But there's definitely a case for institutional care and support. I 100% support that. But we do not live in a system where that's universal, where that's free or publicly provided or anything.
That was going to be my next point. It's behind this big artificial monopoly that the government has created by forcing people to get licensed or participate in it, which raises the costs, which lowers the supply of doctors, which makes it harder and more difficult. Like, if you wanted to get entheogenic therapy, let's say, you would not only have to find a doctor that was licensed.
Johns Hopkins or the Amazon. Those are like or underground. Those are your three real big options.
Right.
And that's problematic, because unless
we're gonna have to speak up. It got louder.
So
here.
Unless you have the money or the social capital to know who you need to know in order to get these things, it's all about access. So that's been my mission, is as someone who's had many profound experiences with these things and got really helped without even looking for it. I know that not just me should have access to this. I know that there's people out there suffering so much worse than me who would desperately use this. And I think so many people who are on their last resort are considering the worst possible things to just escape suffering. I really wish that they would have the chance to try this, because to have a chance to see this, because then I think they would have a transformative experience. And that's really what psychedelics can do. They can give you transformative change by giving you an experience that some people consider can be some of the most intense, most profound experiences of their entire lives. And that in of itself can have a huge impact on your healing and on, so much aspects of your life.
So when you say psychedelics, that's a very broad term, right? Are you actually speaking of just a couple things when you say psychedelics?
So psychedelics it's a vague term. I get it. Right. And especially because I'm with groups that we really try to push the definition. I am also a co-founder of Decriminalized Nature Dallas, and so we actually count cannabis as a psychedelic. And we're also including it with other natural psychedelics. So psychedelic is kind of a broad, vague term, right? Technically, psychedelics, classical psychedelics, are just one subcategory of the wider category of hallucinogens. I don't like the term hallucinogen, because not all hallucinogens actually make you hallucinate, so it just kind of seems like a misnomer for me. But that class of things can refer to classical psychedelics, which are usually serotonergic, and so those are things like LSD, psilocybin, DMT, I think even ibogaine, serotonergic. And the thing is that there's all these different types and classes of psychedelics, right? So they all have different harm profiles. So no one should just think that, I'm doing ibogaine or I'm doing MDMA, it's the same thing as doing LSD. No. I actually had a whole presentation on this. I did a whole speech on psychedelic harm reduction. And one of the important things to keep in mind here is the effective to lethal dose index. So this is basically, for those that don't know, the effective dose is the minimal dose that you need in order to start noticing any kind of effect. The LD50 rate is the rate at which 50% of the population will die if they take that dose. So to give you context, alcohol is 10 times. So if you 10 times the effective dose of alcohol, half the population will die. For MDMA, it's like 16 times. For I believe mescaline, it's either 28 or it's in the 20s. It's some number 20. DMT is 50. And then psilocybin, cannabis, or actually no, psilocybin, LSD are 1,000 times. And then cannabis is 1,000 times plus. So psilocybin, LSD, and cannabis are almost in a remarkable like category by
So it's
themselves.
possible to die from too much cannabis, is what I just heard.
You'd have to do 1,000 times
Yeah.
the effective dose. It's not.
You'd probably be unconscious long before you get
Yeah,
in.
I mean, it's the other things that would probably kill you first, right? Like
Yeah.
if it's smoke, you'd probably die of lack of oxygen before
Yeah.
you'd actually be able to die from the weed.
So what are you doing in this space in terms of activism, let's say? How are
Yeah.
you trying to change the world?
Absolutely. So I am the founding president of the University of North Texas Students for Sensible Drug Policy. This is a new group that was started up the fall before last. And so we're a group that's all about advocating for ending the war on drugs and addressing the many consequences that have stemmed from that disastrous failed policy approach. And so we're doing this by promoting campaigns around and events around drug policy reform, harm reduction, and psychedelic science.
Okay.
Additionally, I'm the co-founder of Decriminalize Nature Dallas. And so basically we're trying to do something very similar that happened in Oakland. For those that don't know, Oakland recently passed through the city council, they passed a resolution that decriminalized various natural psychedelics, including ayahuasca, ibogaine, and they also include psilocybin mushrooms and mescaline-containing cacti. So we, very much emulating their model, we decided to include all those, except given that we're in Texas and in Dallas, we decided we need to include cannabis too. Cannabis always has been considered and always been used in that entheogenic use that I was talking about earlier. You can look this up, it's even on Wikipedia, that is a very long history on all kinds of continents of using cannabis for more psychedelic or entheogenic purpose. So we're trying to claim that as well. So our group is not only just focusing on that, we're also focusing on cannabis. And so specifically what we're trying to do is pass a resolution at the city and county level that would either decriminalize or simply deprioritize the arrest of people being found with these substances or people non-commercially cultivating them. So if you're just doing it for yourself, you're just gifting it out to your friends, you have not a whole lot of incentive of poisoning people. And if you do poison people, you should be arrested for poisoning people, right?
Right.
There doesn't need to be a special way to
Right.
get people like that. But if you're selling something, that speaks to the need of regulation. There has to be some regulatory insight, or unfortunately, as we've seen in the underground vape market, bad actors will rise and do fucked up things because it's not properly regulated. We saw that with vape pens being cut with vitamin E acetate at the end, I think it was this last summer, and they found out it was just one diluter in it's like Honeycut that was just merged recently and started changing the trend because they're like, yeah, vitamin E acetate, put it in your thing and it'll work. And no one, I guess, told them that it's a known thing that you don't vape or inhale vitamin E. You can put it on your skin, you can eat it, that's fine. But if you vape it, it can basically form a pneumonia for yourself. So I think that's a prime example of why we need regulation when it's something that's being made money off of, serious money is being made off of. But if it's something like, if it's a gift economy, there's no need for that. And that's why we say before people start making real serious money off of this, it needs to be decriminalized. We need to decriminalize these things, make sure people aren't getting arrested for these things first, and also that people can grow these things and explore and develop their own relationship to these natural substances. Things that used to always be available up until they arbitrarily got included into some policy, a couple decades ago. Up until then, we didn't need any of that. Everyone did just fine, Maybe not everyone.
I hard disagree with needing the regulation. I think that causes some of the problems that we're also trying to stall. That we're trying to
smart regulation.
Solve.
I should say it's not about.
I think that's an oxymoron.
I get that. I'm a sensibilist. I'm all about finding sensible policies.
A sensibilist. I've never heard that adjective.
It's kind of like maybe just a made-up term, but I really identify with it because it's the idea of favoring sensible politics. It doesn't matter if on some issues you may need a little less regulation. Other issues you may need a little bit more. It just depends on what the topic area that we're talking about. What makes sense based on where the science is at, where the research is at, where's the social.
Everybody's
research.
a sensibilist then, because everybody always advocates what they think is sensible.
But sensible is relative, right?
Exactly.
And that's the thing. I mean, at UNTSSDP, sensible drug policy. That's what we're all advocating for, because we really like to make the case that what we're suggesting is sensible. And part of that is, we actually are asking for regulation, because what we're dealing with now is an unregulated drug economy, and it's only done awful things for people because the unregulated drug economy, they can't go to the courts, they can't go to the police to duke out disputes or problems. they almost inherently have to rely on violence to survive.
Right.
And that violence disproportionately often gets waged to impoverished or marginalized communities, because these are the communities that disproportionately get pushed out of the formal economy and are pushed into the informal economy in the first place.
So it's maximal regulation now. You're like the minarchist of drug regulation.
I mean, it really just depends. I mean, here's the thing: is like I use examples of overregulating of cannabis, right? So in California, we've seen instances where they kind of fucked up regulation, and there's a thriving black underground economy. So whenever there's a thriving underground economy, that's a good metric to see how good the regulatory scheme is.
Right.
If it doesn't exist, then regulation worked out really cool.
Right.
But if it does exist, there's a problem, and it needs to be fixed.
Well, the only time there isn't a black market is when there is no regulation, right? So like even the guy that comes to fix my water heater in my house has to get a license, and I can get a cheaper one if I do a cash price,
Yeah.
So anyway, but what is the mechanism that your initiatives are using to actually make that change in government?
For sure. So, like the city of Oakland, the activists there got to pass through the city council, through a city council resolution.
So it's like lobbying, showing up, talking.
Yes.
Okay.
Getting buy-in support from the city council members. It was really, they had to get a sponsor. And once they found someone who was willing to sponsor the resolution, then they could just present it to their colleagues and then done, which is a really much cheaper way of getting this reform done. And honestly, these politicians often, at least in that area, really respected that they came to them as opposed to just doing a ballot initiative, as we saw in Denver and other areas. But I also think that they had the privilege, being in Oakland, being connected with city council members that were already kind of in the know about psychedelic science. They didn't need to be much convinced.
Isn't this a federal issue though? Isn't it illegalized at the federal level? So it doesn't matter what you do?
It is illegal, and technically, it's the same thing when Colorado made cannabis legal, but it remained illegal to the feds. Yes, technically the feds could still bust people in theory, but it's a very low priority for them. So, and unless administrations change drastically, and or attitudes in our current administration change drastically, they just start going after this stuff. But I mean, it's such a small thing. I really don't think that. I mean, it hasn't caught any extra step from anybody above the city in that regard. California hasn't come down on them. The feds haven't come down on them, as far as I know.
Do you have any sponsors on city councils and have any
We're
traction
still
in that
working
area?
on it, unfortunately, but we do feel we finally got. The biggest fight for us was just getting contact information. You wouldn't think that would be so hard when we're trying to get a hold of city and county leaders, but it's extremely hard. And actually being able to meet
They don't
these
want to talk
folks-
to the plebs.
No. And here's the thing. I actually do cannabis reform and drug policy reform in Denton, too. And that's where I'm really kind of based at now. I go to school there and stuff. And it's so much easier to get things done there because I can meet with each. I've met with almost all the city council members. It's super easy to talk to. I've met with the chief of police. Everyone's the DA. I met with everyone super easily because they're managing a population of like a little over 100,000.
Right.
Whereas you go to big city Dallas, you're one email and maybe hundreds, right? So I understand how hard it is, but we've just recently finally got the contact information and the ability. And we finally have a connection who has good connections with the district attorney's office. And finally, I feel like we're in that position where we can have those meetings now. So
is there any receptivity? Is that are they?
We've reached out.
Yeah, okay.
That's where we're at right now. We reached out. We're waiting.
I don't have
that
hopes
response.
for Texas.
I totally get it. But so basically our goal right now is to get through the Dallas County director of human health and human service, or health and human services. We feel that if we can get some support from him, if we can present this, because we have doctors that support our cause too, and we feel like if we can get a doctor to explain to them why this is beneficial, he might listen to another doctor, right?
Right.
And especially one that works near where he works, right?
Right.
And that's a colleague, and I feel like people are much more likely to listen to their peers.
That's a good strategy.
I really feel like that's a good connection, and it was really hard to get their information. We finally got it. We've reached out. So we're confident that first meeting will be good, and if they don't get back to us, we'll just keep hounding them and keep making the message known, man.
Thanks for your time, sir.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
good talk. Appreciate it. Hi.
Hi.
What's your name?
I'm Jessica Pallant. I'm one of the organizers of the Psychedelics and Consciousness Conference here in DFW that we just finished today.
What is this and why is this?
This is a gathering, an awakening, if you will. This is like-minded people from our community who are coming together basically to say we own our bodies and we will do what we want with our health, especially when plants are so much better than pills, obviously. So people are here to build a community further based on those two notions.
You said that plants are better than pills. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. first of all,
That's a bold claim.
it is a bold claim. So when I say pills, of course, I'm talking about prescriptions, and I'm talking about big pharma, and I'm talking about doctors who like to make profits off of sick people instead of sort of helping them out. And part of body ownership is that you can choose these things for yourself. You can choose a healthier manner. And if there are psychedelic substances, entheogenic plants, if you will, natural methods that you can heal your PTSD or, even slight anxiety, and it's not getting hooked on Zoloft or something like that, I'd say plants are better than pills in that way.
Don't you have to be careful though, because I know from some experience that I won't go too much into on PTSD, not me personally, but someone close to me, that it's entirely possible that if you try and self-treat some of this stuff, you can actually end up worse off than if you go see a professional and go to the licensed government-approved doctor.
Yes, that's an excellent point. And psychedelics, I suppose they're not for the faint of heart, if you will. The use of these substances requires integration, preparation. It requires data. It requires you to do a little bit of hard work. We had lots of sessions today that recommended psychedelics for different ailments, sicknesses, or just bad conditions, as they thought.
So I'm still getting to the why of the event and the benefits of the things, and what I've been talking to people a lot about today is the dichotomy between professional licensed care and prescriptions versus most of what's being advocated for here. And I'm working through breaking myself out of the indoctrination that the only medical care comes from licensed professionals with FDA approved prescriptions. And when I got here, the thing I knew I was going to be challenged on most was calling everything medicine, and I've learned a lot today. I've had some really good talks thanks to you hooking me up with some of your are they speakers, attendees?
Some were speakers and some were attendees.
And so is that the purpose of the event, was to to bring people together to have those conversations?
Yes, absolutely. And while you mentioned that it is dangerous to just go out and if you have PTSD, for example, just to start to take psychedelics and end up worse than you started, the community that we build are here to support each other with what we call integration, which means after you've enjoyed your substance, you're feeling a certain way. You're feeling more relentlessly positive. Maybe you're feeling maybe you're done smoking cigarettes or drinking. And so you have a lot of work to do afterward. The community is the part that helps you integrate, that helps you do the healing. And so I don't recommend anybody to actually use psychedelics on their own, especially for the first time. I would recommend that they always utilize a trusted trip sitter, as we call it.
Trip sitter?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So a trip sitter is a trusted person who is going to hold space for you during
What does
the
hold
time.
space mean?
Hold space is when...
It's like a whole new dictionary.
So a trip sitter would be someone who would not participate in consuming the substances while you do. If I was here, if I was your trip sitter, Patrick, you would take the LSD, and I would read a book without you being able to see down low, and I would make sure you were hydrated. I would make sure that if you got in a bad way, if you started looping and you were just having a experience and just kept saying clouds, something, whatever. If you got
Sounds terrifying.
Sometimes it can be terrifying if
All right.
you're not ready for what happens during these powerful substances. Some substances you can have a very strong reaction. And maybe you need somebody just to physically keep you safe. Maybe you need someone to keep you from going into the water late at night, when there's creepy fish and who knows. But trip sitters guide, community, tribe, friends. This is what we're trying to build today. People who you can have these experiences with.
So you're the first person today to actually get into and describe some of the negative experiences or the risks of some of this
there
stuff.
are risks.
Which I appreciate, because
Absolutely.
without talking about the risks, I can't be sure that it's the person I'm talking to is being honest about the stuff.
Absolutely.
So there are risks,
Absolutely.
which mean that there need to be some benefit. Are there actual benefits? What are they?
There are definitely benefits. One is to heal, in many cases, addiction. This is addiction to alcohol, addiction to cigarettes, addiction to a lot of pills. People have been using Ibogaine. They're taking microdoses of psilocybin, as we heard from Dr. Sophia Korb, and they are having immediate positive responses. So that is one benefit, the healing towards dropping addiction. Another one, as my partner and I showed on the stage, is to find a place in your psychedelics where you can have tough conversations, where you can speak to yourself, as they say. I'm sure a lot of people let you know that when they take DMT or if they do LSD, then they like to put on their mask and do a little bit of deep work with themselves, thinking about what are my issues, what is holding me back, what is troubling me, and how do I move forward. So those are some benefits. The environment to be able to open up with, like I said, the relentless positivity or the newfound confidence that you get.
What about depression? A couple of people I've talked to today said the mushrooms help with depression.
Absolutely. People who are on depression, most of them I know are taking Zoloft or something that is prescribed. I was prescribed Zoloft a long time ago for my depression after I was divorced. It was a pretty sad time. But I remember that the very first thing that happened to me was I started getting sick to my stomach. The second day I took the pills and I had to muscle through because I want to feel better. I want to get the benefits of the pill. But then when I stopped realizing that they had benefits, when I tried to stop the pill, even sicker the first time. So my depression is treated with these. I consume cannabis when I want to stay calm. I am using these substances to combat negativity, negative ego, depression, past issues, just general sadness with the substances and the community and the integration that goes with it specifically.
So now I want to channel my past Republican, Patrick.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. So the first thing is that I came from a place of just extreme skepticism. So when people tell me that they're doing all this stuff, they're getting high, and then they talk about it being treatment and medicine and it heals them, and I'm just like, you're just talking a bunch of trash so that you can make an excuse to get high.
Sure.
That is the position I came from. Yes. And that is what I'm working through today, because life is a journey of learning, and it should be at least. So if you're talking to the general public in Texas.
Yes. Prohibition, Texas.
Yeah. What's your case to be made to have them have their politicians lay off of people?
Well, firstly, I want to remind the Republicans of Texas that in the platform, it says that you would grow and expand the medical cannabis program in Texas. And I think that's based on some of the old Republican values, which is a smaller government and which is related to them not being in your business so much. So I would like to remind them that these issues of body ownership are conservative and they are part of the values of the party.
Self-ownership, yeah.
Self-ownership. And also I would just challenge them and say, do you know anyone doing these? Have you asked? Have you researched? Have you tried? Are you coming from a closed place? Because that's certainly the opposite of what we're trying to promote with the substances.
I think that was the headline, what you just said a minute ago, which is like Republicans, if you believe in self-ownership is not when everyone uses their body how you want them to.
No,
that's not
not.
Self-ownership. Self-ownership is when people are allowed to use their body how they want to because they own it.
That's right.
And they get a say in what happens. And so consider that when you call yourself a Republican and believe in what you believe in, right?
Indeed.
Well, thank you for putting this together. I've really enjoyed being here today.
Excellent.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you came.